Welcome back to the channel. It's me, Russell, here with Rusty Bullwhips, and the next review on the table is going to be this 9-foot 12-plant Indiana Jones Crystal Skull Bullwhip made by Blake Bruning of Trinity Whip Co. So before I actually get into the reviewing part for this whip, let's go over the story of how I actually acquired it. So a few weeks ago, I went to the first inaugural California Jones meetup event in Fullerton, California. There, I met a bunch of awesome indie cosplayers and a bunch of amazing whip handlers and whip crackers. And one of those indie cosplayers, by the name of Newell, had brought over this whip, the 9-foot Crystal Skull whip, and I tried it out there, and I immediately fell in love with it. I thought it was an amazing, beautiful whip. What first attracted me to it was how loose and rigid it was, as you can see in the transition. And for being a 9-foot, it felt more like an 8-foot to me. So it was very lightweight, and I absolutely adored it. I couldn't stop like holding it and taking a look at it, cracking it. It was great. So flash forward a few weeks later, and Andrew messages me on Facebook, and he's asking if I want it, or he's basically saying he wants to get rid of his 9-foot Crystal Skull, and he remembered that I liked it. So we discussed a price, and he sent it over. So here we go. So this is how the whip came into my possession. Alright, I think it's time to talk about this whip. So I think we'll start off with the handle. I like to start off with the handles. We'll start at the bottom where the heel knot is. We have a nice thinly braided wrist loop. I believe it is a 6-strand wrist loop. Blake or Andy, if you guys see this, please feel free to correct me on this. It has the traditional Crystal Skull knot because the wrist loop is longer on this one. I don't know why they put a knot in it, but I think it gives it a little bit of character, makes it look different. The heel knot, I believe, is a 5x4. It's round. It follows the traditional indie heel knots quite well, but it's still quite square in its appearance. Moving up, we have the diamond braided handle. I'm not sure how many diamond counts are in here. I'm just going to guess maybe 12 to 13 counts. We have a higher transition knot here. And what's interesting about this is I think that Blake kind of followed the specs of a Raider's handle, because I compared this to my other Crystal Skull whip, and the transition knot is higher, as well as the handle being slightly thinner. It's very akin to the Raiders look. So this is a Crystal Skull whip, but it has some slight Raiders attributes to it, I think. We have a slight swell, I can feel it right here, before going into the thicker transition knot. And I'd say thick with air quotes around it, because this is a fairly slim transition, and the whole thong itself is fairly thin. It's not too bulky like a lot of other indie whips. Going into the transition zone, like I said before, it's very loose. This is what first attracted me to the whip. It's braided in a very nice herringbone pattern, and it's a 12-plat, so it's fairly loose, so that makes the cracks come out very nice and very clean. It doesn't feel too tight when you throw it out. The tension in this whip is it's excellent. It's not too heavy and not too tight that it makes certain cracks very difficult to do. The taper is very good. It just goes down from the herringbone plat all the way to the bottom, where it transitions into more of like a smaller herringbone braid, actually almost like a 6-plat braid, if we can see here. This is how you know you have a very good kangaroo hide whip, is when you have this excellent taper and this great tension. The transition zone, it's not stiff like the Terry Jacka whips, but it's still very, very accurate, and it's still very good when cracked. I can't say that enough. It's in a beautiful whiskey color with brandy knots, so this is screen accurate. And as I said before in my previous Crystal Skull Whip review from Josh Ellis of Catchel Crafts, this gives the whip its own character. Maybe Indy had to change whips several times over his adventures, or he had to have the knots repaired. I don't know, but something about the Crystal Skull Whip makes it my favorite of all the Indy whips. Moving over to the fall hitch, it's very Joe Strain-like in appearance. It's very thin, it's very streamlined, it's not too bulky and thick, which it doesn't create a lot of drag. And the fall is a Latigo hide fall, roughly almost 30 inches, or I'm going to guess 30 inches. This has been used a lot already by me and Andrew respectively. And it tapers down to one of my own nice nylon poppers. So this is an excellent whip. I can highly suggest Blake Bruning of Trinity Whip Company and Andrew Newell, when you see this video, I can't thank you enough, man. This is such a wonderful, amazing whip. So I'm going to give you a few closer shots of it, and then we're going to go outside to crack it. Alright, here's some closer shots for you guys. You can see the wrist loop with the nice small knot. And there's the Turk's knot. Very streamlined, very flush. All the strands are just splicing together nicely. There's no gaps, there's no bumps. Here's the handle. Very nice. I might actually compare this to my other whip to show you the differences. And you can see the whip's handle looks to be very thin and slender. As I said, it looks a lot like a Raider's handle. And it does have the higher transition zone, transition knot, which is also very nicely braided on. Here's the transition zone going into the thong. Just a beautiful work. Just a lot of detail here. So nicely braided. There's nothing coming apart. Doesn't look like it's going to be coming apart. The fall hitch looks great. Funny thing here, the key strand is actually a little... It's not tucked through the fall like most traditional bullwhips are. I'm not sure why, but I'm not too irked by it. There's the taper again. It's just in this very nice aged whiskey color. It looks a lot darker than my other Crystal Skull Whip. I'll compare it in a second. Just following the taper, and the fall is just beautiful. It's wonderful. It's not too heavy, it's not too thick, it's just right for this whip. So there you go. Alright, so let me bring in my Josh Ellis Crystal Skull Whip, and then we'll go to crack it. Okay, here's my Etsy Crystal Skull Whip on the left and the Trinity Whip Co. whip on the right. So as you can see with the handles, both of them they look similar, but they have some differences, just some very slight differences. Starting off with the heel knots again, we have a larger knot and a larger wrist loop here, as well as a larger heel knob than the Blake Bruning one. This one's a lot more boxier, and it's got a lot more weight than this one. The whole handle with this is very handle heavy. And something I appreciate about this is that it's very light, so it doesn't wear out my arms. The transition zone is very thick, or there's a larger swell here, and the transition knot's very thick, as well as going into the transition itself. And as you can see, I said this whip, the Blake Bruning, follows a Raider style because of the higher knot, even though they're both on an 8-inch spike. So this one follows closer to the Last Crusade and Crystal Skull styles. But this is also a fine whip too. And as you can see, the taper, while nice, is not as good as this one over here. This one has a decent enough taper that gets a good crack out of it, but I think it's because that this whipmaker has only a few things of experience, a little bit of experience with kangaroo hide whip making, so they've still got a lot, like, I'm fumbling over my words here. They've still got a long way to go to they got to work on their taper a little bit before they're gonna get any closer to this kind of quality. So there you go. Here's the two whips, and also you can tell with the colors. This one is a lot darker, so it's a lot more aged looking, and this one's a lot lighter because it's newer. So you can see with two different whip makers the differences between Crystal Skull whips. Also, the transition zone on this whip compared to this whip is considerably different. So this one it follows more of the stiff Terry Jacka style, so it emulates a stiffer handle, and this one follows more of the traditional Indy styles with a looser transition. And there you go, guys. The Trinity Whip Company 9-foot Indiana Jones kangaroo hide Kingdom of the Crystal Skull bullwhip. A big thank you to Andrew Newell for selling me this and giving me such a good price. It's such a wonderful whip, and I can highly suggest Blake Bruning of Trinity Whip Company for all your kangaroo hide whip needs.